Episode 4 opens exactly where we left off. Rue is in the back of a cop car, blue and red lights cutting across her face in the dark as a DEA agent and a dog methodically tear through her vehicle just outside. She sits perfectly still, trying to hold herself together as the search plays out in front of her. They find something. Not a lot, just enough to make her exhale slightly and think that maybe she can talk her way out of this. She's taken in, fingerprinted, and sat down for questioning. The first question: where was she headed? Rue answers without missing a beat. A wedding. The agents side-eye each other just enough for her to catch it, so she fills in the gap before they can ask, explaining that she had been at the wedding earlier but slipped out to check on a friend who hadn't been invited. Then they pivot. Lori's name enters the room, and Rue shakes her head and keeps her expression even. But the agents know she knows Lori, and they know she's been to Mexico. And then they slide a photograph across the table, a photo of Rue in Mexico. And whatever story she had been building crumbles right there in that room. They place the exact package found in her car on the table in front of her, and Rue is suddenly staring down decades behind bars. But they offer her a way out. Work for them as a DEA informant, embedded inside Alamo's operation, gathering what they need to bring down both him and Lori from the inside. They plant a recording app on her phone that quietly captures everything around her, save a new number under Mom so she can be contacted without raising suspicion, and advise her to keep the phone out in the open at all times rather than tucked away where it could be detected. They also swap out Lori's drugs entirely, replacing them with laxatives and sugar pills, so that when Alamo realizes the product is worthless, he'll have no choice but to go back to Lori. And when that meeting happens, Rue will be right there in the middle of it. Welcome back to Sandy's Timeline. Today we'll be breaking down the 2 newly released episodes of Euphoria Season 3. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps and updates like this. Back at the club, Rue returns and the stress is written all over her face. Alamo and one of his associates clock it immediately, commenting on how unsettled she looks, and Rue does her best to play it off and act normal. But then her fanny pack catches Alamo's associate's eye, and he offers to lock it away in the safe so she can move around freely and get on with her work. It sounds like a gesture of kindness, but for Rue, it is anything but. The phone inside that bag is her only way of capturing the evidence the DEA needs. And with it locked away, she has nothing. She has no choice but to hand it over and figure out another way. Then there's Kitty, a new girl brought into the club to replace Angel, who has officially been said to have run away from rehab. Rue narrates quietly that Angel knew she was never coming back, and that just like Tish, everyone would soon forget her. Kitty takes her locker, Kitty takes her place, and the cycle that Rue has been watching play out since she first walked through those doors continues without missing a beat. Meanwhile, across town, Nate is sitting with the strange reality of his reattached toe and has convinced himself it means something. In his mind, the fact that something so broken could be put back together is a metaphor. Proof that if you pick up the pieces, you can restore what was lost, and that maybe the same applies to his marriage and the life he and Cassie were building together. Cassie does not see it that way. The moment she learns that Nate's debt has climbed close to $1 million, something shifts in her and she makes her decision. She packs up and moves out, sells her wedding ring, and uses the money to buy herself an apartment directly across from Lexi's, and throws everything she has into building her social media career from the ground up. Maddy steps into full manager mode immediately, filming content, directing Cassie's look, and putting her through a complete transformation. On the other side of the city, Nate's last attempt to secure funding for his development project is denied, and he breaks down emotionally in public, the carefully maintained image of the man who had everything finally giving way. Back with Cassie, the makeover is complete. She steps into the next phase of her life wearing a backless catsuit with matching gloves, climbing into an Uber as Maddy looks her over and says simply, "You look good." Their destination is the mansion of Brandon Fontaine, a social media celebrity with 20 million followers, and Maddy has one goal: get Brandon to post a video of Cassie, because one tag from someone with his reach could change everything overnight. She coaches Cassie on how to work the room and hold Brandon's attention, then sends her in with one firm instruction: do not sleep with him. Cassie goes wild and instantly commands the room. Brandon's team starts filming her, and then Caitlin shows up, Maddy's former client, now a rising star in her own right, and immediately goes after Brandon's attention. The three of them end up in a private room, and the night gets increasingly out of control with Cassie becoming heavily intoxicated. Maddy realizes she's no longer in the party room and pushes upstairs with Brandon's team behind her, getting there just in time as Cassie shares her handles with everyone in the room. On the drive back home, Cassie's phone begins lighting up and the two of them exchange a look. Quiet, satisfied, electric. They did exactly what they came to do. Back in Hollywood, Lexi is having a completely different kind of disaster. She had reached out to Jules with what seemed like a straightforward opportunity. The soap opera she was working on needed a painting commissioned for the background of a scene, and Jules jumped at the chance. The problem was that Jules didn't quite grasp that the kind of art network television needs is nothing like the kind of art she actually makes. Her summary landscape turned out to be filled with ghoulish figures with very obviously enlarged body parts, and when the showrunner, Patty Lance, sees it, she is furious. The executives in the room do their best to be gracious about it, given what Lexi quietly pulls them aside to explain about Jules, but the damage is already done. Jules agrees to fix the painting, goes home, and instead covers the entire canvas in angry red paint, a full destruction rather than a correction. Lexi is then called in and torn apart by Patty, who lays out exactly what this mistake has cost. The failed shoot alone came to $56,000, and with the time needed to reshoot the total balloons to $191,000. "Don't be a net negative, Lexi," Patty says, and it lands like a verdict. Lexi, who has spent her whole life on the sidelines watching and observing and quietly processing everything around her, is now learning the brutal and very expensive cost of being responsible for other people. Meanwhile, Rue does her best to convince Alamo to buy drugs from Lori or her contacts in Mexico, but the sudden eagerness from someone who worked so hard to leave the mule business behind raises his suspicion immediately. She's lucky that Alamo chalks it up to her using again rather than putting the pieces together and realizing she's working with the feds. But every scene she's in at the Silver Slipper carries the kind of tension that makes you hold your breath because one wrong word and it all falls apart. Later on, Rue spots Kitty on the CCTV and cannot look away, watching the same story she has seen before playing out again in front of her eyes. She approaches Kitty directly and asks whether she is being forced into this work, and Kitty looks at her and says quietly, "I like to dance." But Magic, another dancer at the club, overhears the conversation and immediately brings her concerns to the club manager, making it clear she doesn't trust Rue. Rue slips away to retrieve her phone and gets a call from the number saved as Mom, the DEA agents, who have already been tipped off about Magic's concerns and instruct Rue to discredit her by framing her as a junkie hiding drugs to take the heat off herself. In the middle of the tension building between them, a squad of masked men suddenly raids the club, shoots the manager, and robs the safe, throwing everything into chaos. When the surveillance footage is reviewed to identify the crew, one person gives herself away entirely. The getaway driver, whose lips Rue recognizes immediately. It's Faye, one of Lori's own. And that is where episode 4 ends. Episode 5 opens in the most unexpected way this season has delivered so far. Maddy's plan to use Brandon Fontaine's fame worked. Cassie's account blew up overnight and the followers keep pouring in. Maddy, never one to let momentum slow down, immediately pushes for more. More videos, more photos, ASMR recordings, selling personal items to her growing fan base, anything that keeps the audience engaged and the money flowing. The requests keep escalating and the numbers keep climbing until Cassie hits 50,000 subscribers on OnlyFans, a milestone that opens an entirely new door. Maddy wastes no time capitalizing on it, booking Cassie onto podcasts where she makes deliberately provocative remarks about men, relationships, politics, traditional values, the kind of statements designed to divide a room right down the middle. And Maddy knows exactly what she is doing because there is no such thing as bad publicity. The more people argue about Cassie, the more eyes find her, and the more eyes find her, the more the money grows. But then it comes out that Cassie has quietly been wiring Nate $30,000, and Maddy shuts that down immediately. She sits Cassie down and makes it plain. She cannot keep one foot in the wreckage of that marriage while trying to build something real on the other side of it. And beyond the emotional cost, there is a very practical one. At the rate Cassie is growing, Nate could legally become entitled to half of everything she is building, and that is a conversation that needs to be handled before it becomes a problem she cannot walk back from. On the other side of that equation, Brandon pulls Cassie aside and makes her an offer she wasn't expecting. He wants her to cut Maddy out entirely and go into business with him directly, laying out everything that comes with it. Professional videographers, editors, a full creative team behind her, resources that Maddy simply cannot match. He makes it clear that this isn't personal, it's just business, and that Maddy being a manager can only take her so far before she hits a ceiling. Everyone around Cassie is pulling her in a different direction, and Cassie, who has spent most of her life not knowing who she really is trying to figure out which version of herself she actually wants to become. When she brings Brandon's offer to Nate looking for guidance, what she gets back isn't what she expected. Rather than talking her out of it, Nate tells her to take it. He encourages her to do whatever it takes to grow the brand and make the money, framing it purely in financial terms. The more she earns, the better positioned they both are. It is the clearest sign yet of how far Nate has drifted from the man Cassie once believed she was marrying. And for Cassie, standing at the crossroads of every direction her life could go, the weight of that moment is not lost. On the other side, Alamo calls Rue in alone for the first time since the robbery, and the conversation is short and direct. Lori has reached out and set up a meeting, and Alamo makes it clear, without saying too much, that he intends to make her pay for everything. Rue walks out of that room knowing that whatever is coming fast. She meets with the DEA immediately, and they move quickly, instructing her to call Lori directly to get a wiretap recording. Rue opens the call with an apology for the death of Paladin, trying to use it as a way back in. Lori refuses to come to the phone. Instead, Rue gets through to Wayne, Lori's second in command, who picks up and immediately incriminates himself, telling Rue they have already found her mule replacement and that she is nothing but a distant memory to them now. To Rue's relief, the DEA agents tell her that Wayne's response is enough to keep her out of prison for another day. But the clock is running faster than anyone realizes. Back over at the Silver Slipper, Magic goes to Alamo and tells him that Rue has been stashing drugs in her locker in an attempt to frame her. But what catches Alamo's attention isn't just the drugs, it's the detail sitting underneath the accusation. Magic admitted Rue recognized Faye from the CCTV, but claimed she didn't recognize the voices of the other robbers, and she should have given that they all came from Lori's operation. That inconsistency lodges in Alamo's mind immediately, and his eyes begin moving in Rue's direction. Alamo's suspicion directly at Rue, and making the case that Rue should have recognized those voices too. The implication hangs in the air like smoke, and nobody in that room needs to say it out loud. Rue is a snitch. Then comes a quieter moment. Rue and Jules together in the sugar daddy's apartment, eating Chinese food, circling each other carefully around the edges of everything they haven't managed to say out loud. Jules looks at Rue and tells her she would love it if Rue just took what she wanted, instead of always waiting to be told what to do. A moment that is equal parts tender and charged with everything unresolved between them. But the scene cuts before anything lands, and Jules ends up in the bedroom with the sugar daddy instead. The sugar daddy finds Rue's flannel shirt in the apartment, and the warmth drains out of the room immediately. Convinced that Jules has been bringing other people into his home, he tells her coldly, "I like you, but I love my family, and I will not put them at risk." Jules is left to navigate the fallout quietly and alone, the way she navigates most things. It is a small scene, but it carries the full weight of where Jules finds herself this season. When Cassie finds out that Maddy has been a personal assistant all along rather than the established manager she presented herself as, the power dynamic between them shifts immediately, and Cassie tries to cut her loose. But Maddy doesn't flinch. Instead, she stages a fake canceled audition, and the panic on Cassie's face is enough to have her signing another contract before she has fully thought it through. With Cassie locked back in, Maddy quietly pressures Lexi into getting Cassie onto the audition list for LA Nights, the show Lexi is working on. Cassie walks into that audition and performs a monologue from Antony and Cleopatra, completely misreading the room in the most Cassie way possible. And somehow, against all reasonable expectation, the director loves it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Nate's world is continuing to collapse in the most violent way possible. Unable to meet his payment to Naz, he suffers the consequences in a scene that is brutal and uncomfortably direct. An enforcer breaks into his home, tears off his recently reattached toe, and cuts off his ring finger, a graphic and deliberate message that there is no more grace period and no more time to figure it out. Then comes the final stretch of the episode where everything converges at once. Alamo joins Rue and Maddy at a restaurant and wastes no time getting to the point. Impressed by what Maddy has built with Cassie, he begins asking questions about the content, the money, the model, and what it would take to replicate that kind of success with some of his own girls. Maddy, sharp and completely unfazed, lays it all out for him without missing a beat. Alamo takes her straight to the Silver Slipper and lets her walk the floor, watching as she looks at every girl in that room with a manager's eye before settling on two: Kitty and Magic. Maddy has just stepped into something far bigger and far darker than influencer management, and the episode doesn't give her a moment to consider what that actually means. The episode closes on Rue. Alamo's associates take her out and force her to dig a hole deep enough to bury her up to her neck. And there she is in the ground, exposed, completely at the mercy of a man who has already shot an apple off her head just to make a point. At dawn, Alamo rides toward her on horseback, polo mallet in hand, bearing down on her as the episode cuts to black. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you still riding with Euphoria Season 3? I want to know everything. I'll see you in the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Sandy's Timeline.